Hi, everyone, and welcome to Unstoppable Mindset. Today, we are going to definitely have some fun. I'll tell you about our guests in a moment, but first, I want to tell you about me. That'll take an hour or so. I am Michael Hingson, your host, and you're listening to Unstoppable Mindset, where inclusion, diversity, and the unexpected meet. And I don't know, we may get inclusion or diversity into this, but our guest is Greg Schwem. Greg used to be a TV reporter. Now he's a comedian. Not sure which is funnier. But given some of the reporters I've seen on TV, they really should go into to nightclub business. But anyway, Greg, I want to welcome you to Unstoppable Mindset. We're really glad you're here. I really appreciate you being here and taking the time.
Well, Michael, it is an honor to be included on your show. I'm really looking forward to the next hour of conversation.
I told Greg a little while ago, one of my major life ambitions that I never got to do was to go to a Don Rickles concert and sit in the front row so that hopefully he would pick on me so that I could say, yeah, I saw you once on TV and I haven't been able to see since. What do you think of that, you hockey puck? But I never got to do it. So very disappointed. But
everybody has bucket list moments.
Everybody has bucket list moments.
They don't get around to. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know. Well, the other one is I love to pick on Mike Wallace. I did a radio show for 6 years opposite him in 60 Minutes. And I always love to say that Wallace really had criminal tendencies because he started out being an announcer in radio, and he announced things like the Green Hornet and the Sky King and other shows where they had a lot of criminals. So I just figured he had to be associated with criminals somewhere in his life. Of course, everybody picked on him, and he had broad shoulders. And I regret I never got to meet him, which was sort of disappointing. But I did get to meet Peter Falk. That was kind of fun.
Mike Wallace to Peter Falk. Nice transition there, Michael.
I know. Yeah. Well, I am really glad you're with us. So why don't we start? We'll start with the serious part. Why don't you tell us kind of about the early Greg Schwem and growing up and all that sort of stuff, just to set the stage, as it were.
How far back you want to go? You want to go back to Little League, or you want to just...
Oh, start at the beginning. A long time ago,
yeah, right.
In a galaxy
Exactly.
far,
I was
far
a very
away.
strange child. No, you obviously introduced me as a comedian, and that is my full-time job. And you also said that I was a former journalist, and that is my professional career. Yes, I went from, as I always like to say, I went from depressing people all day long to making them laugh, and that's kind of what I did. I always did want to be. I majored in journalism at Northwestern University, good journalism school. Originally, I always wanted to be a television reporter. That was as a professional career. I dabbled in comedy starting when I was 16. That is the first time I ever got on stage. At my school, my high school, and then at a comedy club. I was one of the first comedy clubs in Chicago, a place called the Comedy Cottage. It was in the beautiful suburb of Rosemont, Illinois. And they were one of the very, very first full-time comedy clubs in the nation. And as a 16-year-old kid, I actually got on stage and did 5 minutes here and 5 minutes there and thought I was hot stuff. But I never, ever thought I would do it for a living. I thought comedy would always be just a hobby. And especially when I went to college, and I thought, okay, Northwestern's a pretty good school, pretty expensive school. I should actually use my degree. And I did. I moved down to Florida, wrote for a newspaper called the Palm Beach Post, which, don't let that title fool you. Palm Beach was a very small segment of the area that it served. But I did comedy on the side just because I moved down there. I didn't know anybody. So I hung out at comedy clubs just to have something to do. And little by little, comedy in the late 80s, it exploded. There were suddenly clubs popping up everywhere, and you were starting to get to know guys that were doing these clubs and were starting to get recognition for just being comedians. And one of them opened up, a very, very good club opened up about 10 minutes from my apartment in West Palm Beach. And I hung out there and started to get more stage time, and eventually started to realize at the same time that I was getting better as a comedian, I was becoming more disillusioned as a journalist in terms of what my bosses wanted me to report on and the tone they wanted me to use. And I just decided that I would just never be able to live with myself if I didn't try it, if I didn't take the plunge into comedy. And that's what I did in 1989, and I've been doing it ever since. And my career has gone in multiple directions, as I think it needs to. If you're going to be in show business and sustain a career in show business, you have to wear a lot of different hats, which I feel like I've done.
So tell me more about that. What does that mean exactly?
Well, I mean, I started out as what you would pretty much, if somebody said, if you heard somebody say I'm a comedian, they would envision some guy that just went to comedy clubs all the time. And that's what I did. I was just a guy that traveled by car all over the Midwest and the Southeast primarily, and did comedy clubs. But I quickly realized that was kind of a going nowhere way to attack it, to do comedy, unless you were incredibly lucky, because there were so many guys doing it and so many clubs, and I just didn't see a future in it. And I felt like I had to separate myself from the pack a little bit. And I was living in Chicago, which is where I'm from, and still reside in Chicago. And I started to get involved with a company that did live trade show presentations. So if you've ever been on a trade show floor and you see people, they're mostly actors and actresses that wear a headset and deliver a spiel, a pitch, like every twice an hour about some company, some new product, and so forth. And I did that, and I started to write material about what I was seeing on trade show floors, and putting it into my stand-up act, stuff about business, stuff about technology, because I was hawking a lot of new computers and things like that. This was the mid-90s when technology was exploding. And I started to put this into my stand-up act, and then I'd have people come up to me afterwards and say, hey, you know, those jokes you did about computers and tech support, if you could come down to our office, you know, we're having a golf tournament, we're having a Christmas party, we would love to hear that material. And little by little, I started transitioning my act into doing shows for the corporate market. I hooked up with a corporate agent, or the corporate agent heard about me and started to open a lot of doors for me in terms of working for very large corporations. And that's pretty much what I've been doing. I stopped working clubs, and I transitioned. Instead of being a comedian, I became a corporate humor speaker. And that's what I do primarily to this day, is to speak at business conferences, just kind of get people to loosen up, get them to laugh about what they do all day without making it sound like I'm belittling what they do. And also, when I'm not doing that, I work about 8 to 10 weeks a year on cruise ships performing for cruise audiences. So that's a nice getaway.
It's interesting. Since I mentioned Don Rickles earlier, years ago, I saw an interview that he did with Donahue. And one of the things that Don Rickles said, and after he said it, I thought about it. He said, I really don't want to pick on anyone who's going to be offended by me picking on them. He said, I try to watch really carefully so that if it looks like somebody's getting offended, I'll leave them alone, because that's not what this is all about. It isn't about abusing people. It's about trying to get people to have fun. And if somebody's offended, I don't want to pick on them. And I've heard a number of albums and other things with him, and just noticed that was really true. He wouldn't pick on someone unless they could take it and had a lot of fun with it. And I thought that was absolutely interesting, because that certainly wasn't, of course, the rep that he had. And
no,
but it was true.
It is, and it doesn't take long to see it, as a comedian, when you're looking at an audience member and you're talking to them, you can tell very quickly. Are they enjoying this? Are they enjoying being the center of attention? A lot of people are. Or are they uncomfortable with it? Now, I don't know that going in. I mean,
no, of course.
And again, that's a very small portion of my show, is to talk to the audience, but it is something, particularly today. I think audiences want to be more involved. I think they enjoy some of the new comedians in their 20s and 30s and so forth. Some of them are doing nothing but what they call crowd work. So they're just doing 45 minutes of talking to the audience, which can be good and can be rough too, because you're working without a net. But I'm happy to give an audience a little bit of that. but I also have a lot of stuff that I want to say too. I mean, I work very hard coming up with material and refining it, and I want to talk about what's going on in my life too. So I don't want the audience to be the entire show.
Right. And they shouldn't be, because
No.
it isn't about that. But at the same time, um, it is nice to involve them. I find that as a keynote and public speaker, I find that true as well, though, is that audiences do like to be involved.
Mm-hmm.
And I do some things right at the outset of most talks to involve people.
Yeah.
And also in involving them, I want to get them to laugh so that I start to draw them in, because later when I tell the September 11th story, which isn't really a humorous thing directly, but
No,
it's
I get good luck. I'm spinning 9/11 to make it fun. I don't think I've ever heard anybody say, by the way, I was trapped in a building. Stick with me. It's kind of cute. It's got a funny ending.
yeah,
Right.
well, and that's right, and it is hard. I can say humorous things along the way in
Mm-hmm.
telling the story,
Sure. Right.
but clearly it's not a story that in of itself is humorous.
Right.
But what I realized over the years, and it's really dawned on me in the last 4 or 5 years, is we now have a whole generation of people who have absolutely no memory of September 11th because
Right.
they were children or they weren't even born yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that my job is to not only talk about it, but literally to draw them into the building and have them walk down the stairs with me. And I have to be descriptive in a very positive way so that they really are part of what's going on. And the reality is that I do hear people come up and say, we were with you when you were going down the stairs. And I think that's my job, because the reality is that we've got to get people to understand there are lessons to be learned from September 11th.
Right.
And the only real way to do that is to attract the audience and bring them in. And I think probably mostly I'm in a better position to do that than most people, because I'm kind of a curious soul, being blind and all that, but it allows me to draw them in.
Yeah.
And it's fun to do that, actually.
And I gotta believe. I mean, obviously, I wasn't there, Michael, but I gotta believe there were moments of humor in people, a bunch of people going down the stairs together.
Sure.
I mean, you put people together. It's like when a bunch of people are in an elevator together. I mean, when I look around and I try to find something humorous in a crowded elevator,
Sure.
and it's probably the same thing. Now, obviously, you got out in time. But and don't, that's the hotel phone, which I just hung up. So, but I think that, I can totally see where you're going from, where if you're talking to people who have no recollection of this, have no memory, where you're basically educating them on the whole event, I think then you have the opportunity to tell the story in whatever way you see fit. And I think that however you choose to do it there's no wrong way to do it, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at.
Well, yeah, I think the wrong way is to be too graphic
Morbid.
and morbid. But
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that I talk about, for example, is that a colleague of mine who was with me, David Frank, at about the 50th floor, suddenly said, "Mike, we're going to die. We're not going to make it out of here." And as I tell the audience, typically, as you heard my introduction at the beginning, I have a secondary teaching credential, and one of the things that you probably don't know about teachers is that there's a secret course that every teacher takes called Voice 101, How to Yell at Students. And and so what I tell people is that when David said that, I just said in my best teacher voice, "Stop it, David. If Roselle and I can go down these stairs, so can you."
Right.
And he told me later that that brought him out of his funk. And he ended up walking a floor below me and shouting up to me everything he saw. And it was just mainly everything is clear, like I'm on floor 48, he's on 47, 47th floor, everything is good here.
Mm-hmm.
And what I have done for the past several years in telling that part of the story is to say David, in reality, probably did more to keep people calm and focused as we went down the stairs than anyone else, because anyone within the sound of his voice heard someone who was focused and sounded okay. You know, hey, I'm on the 44th floor. This is where the Port Authority cafeteria is, not stopping. And it helps people understand that we all had to do what we could to keep everyone from not panicking. And it almost happened a few times that people did, but we worked at it. But the idea is that it helps draw people in. And I think that's so important to do for my particular story, is to draw them in and have them walk down the stairs with me, which is what I do.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, I'm curious about something that keeps coming up. I hear it every so often. Public speaker experts and people who are supposedly the great gurus of public speaking say, you shouldn't really start out with a joke.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard that so often, and I'm going, give me a break.
Well, I think
I think it depends. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's two schools of thought to that. I think if you're going to start out with a joke, it better be a really good one, or something that you either has been battle tested, because if it doesn't work, now you know, if you're hoping for a big laugh, now you say, well, you're a comedian. What do you do? You know, I mean, I just sort of worked my way into it a little bit.
Yeah.
And I'm a comedian. So, and you know, it's funny, Michael, I've had CEOs before say to me, hey, you know, I've got to give this presentation next week. Give me a joke I can tell to everybody. And I always decline. I always, it's like, I don't need that kind of pressure. And it's like, I can tell you a funny joke, but
you telling the same joke isn't going to work. Yeah,
you have to deliver it. You know, I can't deliver it for you.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I also, you know, on that note, I've never been a big fan of stand-up comedy classes, and you see them all popping up all over the place now.
Yeah.
A lot of comedy clubs will have them, and usually you take the class, and the carrot at the end is you get to do 5 minutes at a comedy club. All right. Now, if that is your goal, if you're somebody who always like, gosh, I wonder what it would be like to stand up on stage and be a comedian for 5 minutes. That's something I'd really like to try. By all means, take the class. All right. But if you think that you're going to take this class and you're going to emerge a much funnier person, like all of a sudden you weren't funny, but now you are, don't take the class.
Yeah.
And I think, sadly, that a lot of people sign up for these classes thinking the latter, thinking that they will all of a sudden become a comedian. And it doesn't work that way. I'm sorry. You cannot teach unfunny people to be funny.
No.
Some of us have the gift of it, and some of us don't. Some of us are really good with our hands and just know how to build stuff and how to look at things and say, I can do that. And some of us, myself included, definitely do not. You know, I think you can teach people to be more comfortable in front of an audience.
Correct.
I think that is definitely a teachable thing, but I don't think that you can teach people to be funnier or funny.
And I agree with that. I tend to be amazed when I keep hearing that one of the top fears in our world is getting up in front of an audience and talking with them, because people really don't understand that audiences, whatever you're doing, want you to succeed, and they're not against you. But we have just conditioned ourselves collectively that speaking is something to be afraid of.
Yes. I think, though, I'm sure that fear, though, of getting up in front of people has only probably been exacerbated and been made more intense because now everybody in the audience has a cell phone. And to be looking out at people and to see them on their phones.
Yeah.
And yet you prepped all day long. You've been nervous. You probably didn't sleep the night before if you're one of these people who are afraid of speaking in public.
Yeah.
And then to see people on their phones, it used to bother me. It doesn't anymore because it's just the society we live in.
Well,
I wish people could put their phones down and
yeah.
just enjoy laughing for 45 minutes. But unfortunately, our society can't do that anymore. So I
Well,
just hope that I can get most of them to stop looking at it.
I don't make any comments about it at the beginning, but I have on a number of occasions been delivering a speech and I hear a cell phone ring and I'll stop and go, hello? And I don't know for sure what the person with the cell phone does,
Mhm.
but by the same token, they really shouldn't be on their phone.
Right.
Um, and and it works out okay. Nobody's ever complained about it when I just say hello, or I'll go hello. You don't say, um, and things like that. But I don't prolong it. I'll just go back
Right.
to what I was talking about. But I remember when I lived in New Jersey, Sandy Duncan was Peter Pan in New
Right.
York. One night she was flying over the audience and there was somebody on his cell phone and she happened to be going near him and she just kicked the phone out of his hand. And I think that's one of
Oh,
the things that started Broadway in saying, if you have a cell phone, turn it off. And those are the announcements that you hear at the beginning of any Broadway performance today.
unfortunately, people don't abide by that because
I know.
you're still hearing cell phones go off
Yeah.
in Broadway productions at the opera or wherever.
Yeah.
So people just can't. And there you go. There, that just shows you're fighting a losing battle.
Yeah. It's just one of those things. And
Mhm.
you got to cope with it. What
I will
about,
say one on that note, though,
yeah.
I will say, if I can interrupt real quick,
Yeah.
there was one show I did where nobody had their phone. It was a few years ago. I spoke at the CIA. Uh,
Ah,
I spoke for some employees of the CIA, and this might freak people out because you think, how is it that America's covert intelligence agency, you'd think they would be on their phones all the time?
yeah.
No, if you work there, you cannot have your phone on you.
Hmm.
And so I had an audience of about 300 people who I had their total attention
Yeah.
because there was no other way to they had no choice but to listen to me, and it was wonderful. It was just a great show, and I it was just so refreshing.
Yeah. Um, and mostly I don't hear cell phones, but they do come up from time to time. And if they do,
Sure.
then, it happens. Now, one of my favorite stories is I once spoke in Maryland at the Department of Defense, which anybody who knows anything knows that's the National Security Agency, but they call it the Department of Defense as if we don't know.
Right.
And my favorite story is that I had at the time a micro cassette recorder and it died that morning before I traveled to Fort Meade. And I forgot to just throw it away and it was in my briefcase. So I got to the fort, they searched, apparently didn't find it, but on the way out, someone found it. They had to get a bird colonel to come to decide what to do with it. And I said, throw it away. And they said, no, we can't do that. It's yours. And they decided it didn't work and they let me take it. And I threw it away. But it was so funny to be at the fort and see everybody running around crazy. What do we do with this micro cassette recorder? This guy's been here for an hour.
Yeah.
So all sorts of things happen. What do you think about there's a lot of discussion about comedians who use a lot of foul language in their shows, and then there are those who don't, and people seem to like the shock value of that.
Yeah, I'm very old school in that. I guess my short answer is no. I've never ever been one of those comedians.
Mm-hmm.
Never. I do a clean show. I actually learned my lesson very early on. I think that I think comedians tend to swear because when they first start out of nerves,
Good point.
because I will tell you that profanity does get laughter. And I've
Yeah.
always said if you want to experiment on that, have a comedian write a joke. And let's say he's got two shows that night. Let's say he's got an 8 o'clock show and a 10 o'clock show. So let's say he does the joke in the 8 o'clock and it's, the cadence is bump, 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 bump. punchline. Okay. Now let's see how that plays. Now he does the 10 o'clock show and it's bumpa 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 effing bump. Okay.
Yeah.
I pretty much guarantee you the 10 o'clock show will get a bigger laugh.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because it's like the audience is programmed like, oh, okay, we're supposed to laugh at that now. And I think a lot of comedians think, aha, I have just discovered how to be successful as a comedian. I will just insert the F word in front of every punchline.
Yeah.
And you can kind of tell what comedians do that and what comedians, I mean, I am fine with foul language, but have some jokes in there too. Don't make the foul word the joke.
The joke, right.
And I can say another thing. Nobody has ever said to me, I cannot hire you because you're too clean. I've never gotten that in all the years I've been doing this. And I know there's lots of comedians who do work blue who have said, who have been turned down for that very reason. So I believe if you're a comedian, the only way to get better is to work any place that'll have you.
Yeah.
And you can't, so you might as well work clean so you can work any place that will have you as opposed to being turned away.
Well, and I know what happened to him and all that, but at the same time, I grew up listening to Bill Cosby and the fact that he was always clean. And yeah, I understand everything that happened, but you can't deny and you can't forget so many years of humor and all the things that he brought to the world and the joy he brought to the world in so many ways.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, no, I agree. And he worked everywhere. Jay Leno is another one. I mean, and Jay Leno is kind of on the same wavelength as me as far as don't let the profanity become the joke. Eddie Murphy was very foul. Richard Pryor, extremely foul. But they also, Pryor especially, had very intelligent material. I mean, you can tell, and then if you want to insert, your F-bombs and so forth, that's fine. But at least show me that you're trying. At least show me that you came in with material in addition to the foul language.
Yeah, the only thing I really have to say about all that is that Jay Leno should just stay away from cars. But that's another story.
Oh, yeah, it's starting to look that way, isn't it? It was fun for a while, Jay, but yeah, there's just too many. It's like Harrison Ford and planes.
Yeah, same concept.
At some point, you're like, this isn't working out.
Now, I submit that living here in Victorville and just being out on the streets and being driven around and all that, I am firmly convinced, given the way most people drive here, that the bigoted DMV should let me have a license because I am sure I can drive as well as most of the clowns around here.
Yeah.
It's the way they drive. I have no doubt. Oh, gosh. Well, you switched from being a TV journalist and so on to comedy. Was it a hard choice? Was it really difficult to do, or did it just seem like this is the time and this is the right thing to do?
It was both. It was hard because I really did enjoy my job, and I liked being a TV news reporter. I liked a job that was different every day once you got in there because you didn't know what they were going to send you out to do. Yes, you had to get up and go to work every day and so forth. So there's a little bit of, there's a little bit of the mundane, just like there is in any job. Yeah. But once you were there, I liked just never knowing what the day would bring. Right. And I think if I'd stayed with it, I think I could have gone pretty far, particularly now because now it's more people on TV are becoming more entertainers. News people are becoming more entertainers.
They are.
A lot of would-be wannabe comedians and so forth, and I don't particularly think that's appropriate. But
I agree.
But so it was hard to leave, but it gets back to what I said earlier. At some point, you got to say, I was seeing comedians making money, and I was thinking, gosh, if they're making money at this, I'm not hilarious, but I know I'm funnier than that guy. Yeah, and I'm funnier than her. So why not? And I was young and I was single, and I thought if I don't try it now, I never will. And I'll bet there's just some hilarious people out there.
Yeah.
who didn't ever, who just were afraid to take that chance.
They
And
wouldn't take the leap. Yeah.
right. And now they're probably kicking themselves. And I'm sure maybe they're very successful at what they do, but they're always going to say, what if?
If
What
I
if
had
I?
only done
And
this. Yeah.
I never ever wanted to say that.
Yeah. Well, and there's something to be said for being brave and stepping out and doing something that you don't expect or that you didn't expect or that you weren't sure how it was going to go. But if you don't try, then you're never going to know just
Mhm.
how much you could really accomplish and how much you can really do. And I think that the creative people, whatever they're being creative about, are the people who do step out and are willing to take a chance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And I've told my kids that too. It's just like if it's something that you're passionate about, do it. Just try it. If it doesn't work out, then at least you can say I tried it.
And if it doesn't work out, then you can decide, what do I need to do to figure out why it didn't work out, or
Right.
is it just not
And do
me?
I want to keep going?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what is the difference between being a nightclub comedian and a corporate comedian? Because they are somewhat different. I think I know the answer, but what would you say the difference is between them?
I think the biggest thing is the audiences. I think
Yeah.
when you are a nightclub comedian, you are working in front of people who are there to be entertained.
Yeah.
They paid money for that. That's what they're expecting. They at some point during the day, they said, "Hey, let's go laugh tonight. That's what we really want to do." When you're working in front of a corporate audiences, that's not necessarily the case. They are there. I primarily do business conferences and association meetings and so forth, and I'm just one cog in the wheel of a whole day's worth of meetings.
Mm-hmm.
These are, for the most part, very dry and boring. Maybe certainly necessary, educational. They're learning how to do their job better or something. And then you have a guy like me come in, and people aren't always ready to laugh,
Yeah.
despite the fact that they probably need to. But they're not always in that mindset. And also the time of day. I mean, I do a lot of shows at 9 a.m. I do shows after lunch, right before lunch. I actually do very few shows in the evening. Believe it or not. And so then you kind of have to, while you're doing your act or your presentation or your speech, as I call it, you kind of have to let them know that it is okay. What you're doing is okay. And
Right.
that they should be okay with laughing. They shouldn't be looking around the whole time, wondering if other people are laughing. Can I tell you a quick story about how I drive that point home?
Sure. Why not?
Yeah, I'll condense it into like 5 minutes. I mentioned that I work on cruise ships occasionally, and one night I was performing, and it was the first night of the cruise. And if anybody's ever been on a cruise, know the first night entertainers don't like the first night because people are tired. They're a little edgy because they've been traveling all day. They're confused because they're not really sure where they're going on a ship. And the ones that have got it figured out usually overserve themselves because they're on vacation. So you put all that. So I'm doing my show on the first night, and it's going very well. And about 5-6 minutes in, I do a joke. Everybody laughs. Everybody shuts up. And from the back of the room, in total darkness, I hear, "Ha," just like that. And I'm like, all right, probably overserved. So the rule of comedy is that everybody gets I was like, I'll let it go once.
Yeah.
So I just kind of looked off in that direction, didn't say anything, kept going with my act. About 10 minutes later, same thing happens. I tell a joke. Everybody laughs. Everybody shuts up. Ha. Now I'm like, okay, I've got to address the elephant in the room. So I think I just made some comment like, I didn't know Roseanne Barr was on this cruise, because that was like the sound of the
Yeah.
voice. Okay, everybody laughed. Nothing happened. About 5 minutes later, it happens a third time. And now I'm just like, this is going to stop. I'm going to put a stop to this. And I just fired off, I can't remember, 3, just like, hey, man, you're just a little behind everybody else in this show and probably in life, too. That, things like that. And it never happened again. So I'm like, okay, mission accomplished on my part. Comedians love it when we can shut up somebody like that. Anyway, Show's over. I am out doing a meet and greet. Some guy comes up to me and he goes, hey, that kid you were making fun of is mentally handicapped. And now, of course, I don't know this, but out of the corner of my eye, I see from the other exit a man pushing his son in a wheelchair out of the showroom. And I'm just like, oh, what have I done?
Woo!
And and of course, when you're on a cruise, you're on a cruise. When you're a cruise ship entertainer, you have to live with your audience. So I couldn't hide. I spent like the next 3 days, and it seemed like wherever I was, the man and his son in the wheelchair were nearby. And finally, on the fourth day, I think about it was, I was waiting for an elevator. Again, 3,500 people on this ship, okay? I'm waiting for an elevator. The elevator door opens. Guess who are the only two people in the elevator? The man and his son. And I can't really say I'll wait for the next one. So I get on, and I said to the father, I said, I just want you to know, I had no idea, I'm so sorry. I can't see back there, this kind of thing. And the dad looks at me. He puts his hand up to stop me, and he points to me and he goes, I thought you were hysterical. And it was, not only was it relief, but it kind of, it's sort of a lesson that if you think something is funny, you should laugh at it.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes in corporate America, my point in this, I think sometimes when you do these corporate shows, I think that audience members forget that. And I think they're very busy looking around to see if their immediate boss thinks it's funny. And eventually everybody's looking at the CEO to see if they're laughing.
Of course,
I think if you're doing it that way, if that's the way you're approaching humor, you're doing yourself a disservice if you're stopping yourself from laughing at something that you think is funny.
I do think that all too often the problem with meetings is that we as a country, we in corporations don't do meetings right anyway. For example, early on, I heard someone at a convention of the National Federation of the Blind say he was the new executive director of the American Foundation for the Blind, and he said, I have instituted a policy, no Braille, no meetings. And what that was all about was to say, if you're going to have a meeting, you need to make sure that all the documentation is accessible to those who aren't going to read the print. I take it further and say you shouldn't be giving out documentation during the meeting. And you can use the excuse, well, I got to get the latest numbers and all that. And my point is, you shouldn't be giving out documentation at a meeting, because the meeting is for people to communicate and interact with each other. And if you're giving out papers and so on, what are people going to do? They're going to read that, and they're not going to listen to the speakers. They're not going to listen to the other people. And we do so many things like that. We've gotten into a habit of doing things that become so predictable, but also make meetings very boring, because who wants to look at the papers? Well, you can be listening to people who have a lot more constructive and interesting things to say anyway.
Yeah. I think COVID definitely changed meetings. Some for the better and some for the worse. I think that a lot of things that were done at meetings, COVID and made us realize a lot of that stuff could be done virtually. That you didn't have to just have everybody sit and listen to people over and over and over again. But
unless you're Donald Trump.
That's
another story.
Yes, exactly. Another podcast episode. But I do think also that I think COVID changed audiences. I think, we talked a little bit earlier about crowd work and audiences wanting to be more involved. I think COVID precipitated that, because if you think about it, Michael, for 2.5 years during COVID, our sole source of entertainment was our phone, which meant that we were in charge of the entertainment experience. You don't like something? Swipe left, scroll down, scroll, find something else, that kind of thing. I'm not entertained in the next 4 or 5 seconds, so I'm going to do this. And I think when live entertainment returned, audiences kind of had to be retrained a little bit, where they had to learn to sit and listen and wait for the entertainment to come to them. And granted, It might not happen immediately. It might not happen in the first 5 seconds, but you have to just give people like me a chance. It will come to you. It
Right.
will happen, but it might not be on your timetable.
Right. Well, and I think that is all too true. For me, I didn't find COVID to be a great inconvenience because I don't look at the screen anyway.
Right.
And so in a sense, for me, COVID wasn't that much of a change other than not being in an office or not being physically at a meeting. And so I was listening to the meeting on the computer, and that has its nuances. Like you don't necessarily get the same information about how everyone around you is reacting,
Mhm.
but it didn't bother me, I think, nearly as much as it did everyone else who has to look at everyone. Of course, I have no problems picking on all those people as well, because what I point out is that disabilities has to be redefined, because every one of you guys has your own disability. You're light dependent, and you don't do well when there's dark, when the dark shows up.
Mhm.
And we now have an environment where Thomas Edison invented the electric light bulb, and we've spent the last 147 years doing everything we can to make sure that light is pretty ubiquitous, but it doesn't change a thing when suddenly the power goes out and you don't have immediate access to light. So that's as much a disability as us light independent people who don't care about that.
Right. I agree.
But it is interesting, and it is also important that we all understand each other and are willing to tolerate the fact that there are differences in people, and we need to recognize that with whatever we're doing.
Yeah, I agree.
What do you think about? So today we have obviously a really fractured environment and fractured country, and everyone's got their own opinions, and nobody wants to talk about anything, especially politics wise. How do you
Mhm.
think that's all affecting comedy and what you get to do and what other people are doing?
Well, I think there's multiple answers to that question too. I think it makes people nervous, wondering what the minute a comedian on stage brings up politics, the minute he starts talking about a politician, whether it's our president, whether it's somebody else, you can sense a
Mm-hmm.
tension in the room a little bit, and it's. I mean, it's funny. One of my best friends in comedy got to open for another comedian at Carnegie Hall a couple of years ago, and I went to see him, and I'm sitting way up in the top, and he is just crushing it. And then at one point, he decided to do an impression of Mitch McConnell,
Oh,
which he does very well. However, the minute he said Mitch McConnell, I you could just sense
you
this
could
is
sense it.
Carnegie freaking Hall. And after the show, he and I always like to dissect each other's shows. That's what comedians do. And I just said to him, I go, why did you decide to insert Mitch McConnell in there? And I didn't say it like, you moron, that was stupid.
Yeah.
But I was genuinely curious. And he just goes, well, I just really like doing that bit, and I like doing that voice and so forth. And it's not like the show crashed and burned afterwards.
No.
He did the joke, and then he got out of it, and he went on to other stuff, and it was fine. But I think that people are just so on their guard now.
Yeah.
And that's why, Jay Leno always said he was an equal opportunity offender. I think you will do better with politics if you really want to insert politics into your act. I think you would be better making fun of both sides.
Yeah. I think that's true.
Yeah, and I think too often comedians now use the stage as kind of a bully pulpit. Like, I have a microphone and you don't.
Mm-hmm.
So I am now going to give you my take on Donald Trump or the Democrats or whatever. And I've always said, talk about anything you want on stage, but just remember, you're at a comedy club. People came to laugh. So is there a joke in here?
Yeah.
Or are you just ranting about something? Because
and you got to be careful.
You have to get this off your chest, and your way is right. It's I hate to say it, but that's why podcasts, no offense, Michael, yours is not like this, but I think one of the reasons podcasts have gotten so popular is a lot of podcast hosts see a podcast is a chance to just rant about whatever's on their mind. And it's amazing to me how many podcast hosts that are hosted by comedians have a second guy, have a sidekick to basically laugh and agree with whatever that person says. I think Joe Rogan is a classic example, and he's one of the most popular ones. But and I don't quite understand that, because if you're a comedian, you made the choice to work solo,
right?
So why do you need somebody else with you?
I'm fairly close to Leno. My remark is a little bit different. I'm not so much an equal opportunity offender as I am an equal opportunity abuser. I'll pick on both sides if politics comes into it at all, and it's fun. And I remember when George W. Bush was leaving the White House, Letterman said, "Now we're not going to have anybody to joke about anymore," and everyone loved it. But still, I recognize that in the world today, people don't want to hear anything else. Don't confuse me with the facts or any of that. And it's so unfortunate, but it is the way it is. And so it's wiser to stay away from a lot of that unless you can really break through the barrier.
I think so. And I also think that people, one thing you have to remember, I think, is when people come to a comedy show, they are coming to be entertained.
Yeah.
They are coming to kind of escape from the gloom and doom that unfortunately permeates our world right now. I've always said that if you walked up to a comedy club on a Saturday night, and let's say there were 50 people waiting outside, waiting to get in, and you asked all 50 of them, what do you hope happens tonight? Or why are you here? All right. I think from all 50, you would get, I would just like to laugh.
Yeah.
I don't think one of them is going to say, I really hope that my opinions on what's happening in the Middle East get challenged right now by the comedian. No one is going to say that. No, it's like, I hope I get into it with the comedian on stage because he thinks this way about a woman's right to choose, and I think the other way. And I really, really hope that he and I will get into an argument about it to the middle of the show.
Yeah. That's not why people come.
No, it's not. And unfortunately, I think that there's a lot of comedians that don't understand that.
Yeah.
Again, talk about whatever you want on stage, but just remember that your surroundings. If you bill yourself as a comedian,
make it
be funny.
Yeah.
Be funny.
Well, and nowadays, especially for you, for me, and so on, we're growing older, and I think you point out audiences are getting younger. How do you deal with that?
Well, what I try to do is a couple of things. I try to talk as much as I can about topics that are relevant to a younger generation, AI being one. I one of the things I do in my show is I say, I really wasn't sure how to start off. And when you're confused these days, you turn to AI to answer your questions. Yeah. You turn to ChatGPT. And I've actually written, said to ChatGPT, I'm doing a show tonight for a group of construction workers who work in the Midwest. It's a $350 million company, and it's this. Try to be very specific. Yeah. Give me a funny opening line. And of course, ChatGPT always comes up with something kind of stupid, which I then relate to the audience, and they love that. They love that concept. So, I think there's a lot of material that you can do on generational differences, but I will say I am very, very aware that my audience is, for the most part, younger than me now, unless I want to spend the rest of my career doing, over 55 communities. Not that they're not great laughers, but I also think there's a real challenge in being older than your audience and still being able to make them laugh. But I think you have to remember, like you said, there's people now that don't remember 9/11, that have no concept of it. Yeah. So don't be doing references from, say, the 1980s or the early 1990s, and then come off stage and go, man, that didn't hit at all. No one, they're stupid. They don't get it. Well, no, it's not that they don't get it. It's just that they weren't
They
around.
weren't around.
Right. So that's on you.
One of the things that, people ask me is if I will do virtual events, and I'll do virtual events, but I also tell people the reason I prefer to do in-person events is that I can sense what the audience is doing, how they're reacting, and what they feel if I'm in a room speaking to people, and I don't have that same sense if I'm doing something virtually.
Agreed. Same way.
Now, for me, at the same time, I've been doing this now for 23 years, so I have a pretty good idea in general how to interact with an audience to draw them in, even in a virtual environment. But I still tend to be a little bit more careful about it, and it's just kind of the way it is.
Hmm.
And you learn to deal with it. Well, for you, have you ever had writer's block, and how did you deal with it?
Yes, I have had writer's block. I can't think of a single comedian who's never had writer's block. And if they say they haven't, I think they're lying. When I have writer's block, the best way for me to deal with this, and just so you know, I'm not the kind of comedian that can sit down and write jokes. I can write stories. I've written 3 books, but I can't sit down and just be funny for an hour all by myself. I
Yeah.
need interaction. I need communication. And I think when I have writer's block, I tend to go out and try and meet strangers and can engage them in conversation and find out what's going on with them. I mean, you mentioned about dealing with the younger audience. I am a big believer right now in talking to people who are half my age.
Mm-hmm.
I like doing that in social settings because I'm curious. I'm curious as to how they think. I'm curious as to, um, how they spend money, how they save money, what their hopes and dreams are for the future, and that kind of thing. And that's the kind of stuff that then I'll take back and try and write material about.
Mm.
And I think that I think it's fun for me, and it's really fun to meet somebody who I'll give you a great example. Just last night. Last night there's a bar that I have that's about 10 a stone's throw from my condo, and I love to stop in there. And every now and then, sometimes I'll sit there and I won't meet anybody, and sometimes different. So there was a guy, I'd say he's probably in his early 30s, sitting 2 over, and he was reading, which I find intriguing, that people come to a bar and read. But
Yeah.
people do it. I mean, and I just said to him, and he was getting ready to pay his bill. And I just said, if you don't mind me asking, what are you reading? And he's like, oh, it's by Ezra Klein. And I go, oh, I've listened to Ezra Klein before. And he goes, yeah, he says, I'm a big fan, and da 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 da. And next thing you know, we're just riffing back and forth. And I ended up staying. Put it this way, Michael, it took him a very long time to pay his bill because we had a conversation, and it was just such a pleasure to talk to people like that. And I think that, and it's a hard thing. It's a hard thing for me to do because I think people are on their guard a little bit. Like, why is this guy who's twice my age talking to me at a bar? That seems a little weird. And I would get that. I can see that. But as I mentioned in my latest book, I don't mean, because I devote a whole chapter to this. And I say in the book, I don't mean you any harm. I'm not trying to hit on you, or I'm not creepy old guy at the bar. I am genuinely interested in your story and your life. And I want to be the least interesting guy in the room. And that's kind of how I go about my writing too, is just you drive the story. And even though I'm the comedian, I'll just fill in the gaps and make them funny.
Well, I know that I have often been invited to speak at places, and I've wondered, what am I going to say to this particular audience? How am I going to deal with them? They're different than what I'm used to. What I found, I guess you could call that writer's block, but what I found is if I can go early and interact with them, even if I'm the very first speaker, if I can interact with them beforehand, or if there are other people speaking before me, invariably I will hear things that will allow me to be able to move on and give a relevant presentation specifically to that group. which is what it's really all about.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm with you, and I appreciate it. And it's good to get to the point where you don't worry about the block, but rather you look at ways to move forward and interact with people
Right.
and make it fun.
Right. Right. And I do think I think COVID took that away from us a little bit,
Yeah.
obviously, but I do think people missed that. I think that people, once you get them talking, are more inclined to not think that you have ulterior motives. I
Yeah.
think people do enjoy putting their phones down a little bit, but it's kind of a two-way street. When I do meet people, if it's only me asking the questions, eventually I'm going to get tired of that.
Yeah.
I think there has to be a reciprocity thing a little bit. And one thing I find is with the Gen Zs and maybe millennials, they're not as good at that as I think they could be.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're happy to talk about themselves, but they're not really good at saying, so what do you do for a living?
Yeah.
Or what, tell me about you. And I mean, that's how you learn about other people.
Yeah. Tell me about your latest book, Turning Gut Punches into Punchlines. That's a interesting title.
Yeah, well, the more interesting is the subtitle. So it's Turning Gut Punches into Punchlines, a comedian's journey through cancer, divorce, and other hilarious stuff.
Not like you haven't done anything in the world. Okay.
Right. So other than that, how was the play, Mrs. Lincoln?
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
See, now you get that reference. I don't know if I could use that on stage, but anyway.
It depends on your audience, but
yeah, they're like, what's he talking? Who's Lincoln?
And I've been to Ford's Theater too, so that's okay.
Yes, as have I. So
it was much later than Lincoln, but that's okay.
You're not that old, right?
No.
Well, okay. So as the title implies, I did have sort of a double gut punch just in the last 2 years. So I got divorced late in life after 29 years of marriage, and while that was going on, I got a colon cancer diagnosis.
Oh.
And I was dealing with all this while also continuing work as a humor speaker, okay, as a comedian. And I just decided I got it. First of all, I got a very clean bill of health. I'm cancer free. I am finally divorced. So, and I started to think, I wonder if there's some humor in this. I would, Michael, I've been on stage for like 25 years telling people that, you can find something funny to laugh at. You can find humor in any situation. It's kind of like what we were talking about, all the people going down the stairs in the building, in the World Trade Center. All right. If you look around enough, maybe there's something funny. And I've been preaching that, but I never really had to live that until now.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, maybe there's something here. Maybe this is my chance now to embrace new experiences. It was kind of when I got divorced, when you've been married half your life and all of a sudden you get divorced, everything's new to you.
Yeah.
You're living alone. You're doing things that your spouse did so many years, and you're having to do those. And you're having to make new friends.
Yeah.
And all of that, I think, is very humorous. So the more I saw a book in there, that I started writing before the cancer diagnosis. And I thought, was there enough here? Just like, okay, a guy at 60 years old gets divorced. Now, what's going to happen to him? The diagnosis kind of it just added another wrinkle to the book.
Yeah.
Because now I have to deal with this, and I have to find another subject to make light of a little bit. So the book is not a memoir. I don't start it off and when I was 7. I played, I went to this school, and it's not that. It's more just about reinvention and just seeing that you can be happy later in life, even though you have to kind of rewrite your story a little bit.
And I would assume you bring some of that into your act every so often.
Very much so. Yeah. I created a whole
course.
new speech called Turning Gut Punches into Punchlines. And I use some of the stuff that I did. But, there's a chapter in the book about, I about gig work.
Mm.
Actually, 3 chapters. I went to work for Amazon during the Christmas holiday rush, just scanning packages. I wanted to see what that was like. I drove for Uber. Which I did for a while, and to tell you the truth, I miss it. I ended up selling my car, but I miss it because of what we just talked about. It was a great way to communicate with people. Yeah. It was a great way to talk to people, find out about them, be the least interesting person in the car anyway. And there's a chapter about dating and online dating, which I had not had to do in 30 years. There's a lot of humor in that. I went to therapy. I'd never gone to therapy before. I wrote a chapter about that. So I think people really respond to this book because I think they see a lot of themselves in it. Lots of people have been divorced. There's lots of cancer survivors out there. And there's lots of people who just suddenly have hit a speed bump in their life and they're not really sure how to deal with it.
Right.
And my way of this book is just about deal with it through laughter. And I'm the perfect example.
I hear you. Well, I know, and I've been through the same sort of thing as you, not a divorce, but my wife and I were married for 40 years and she passed away in November of 2022 after 40 years of marriage. And as I tell people, I got to be really careful because she's monitoring me from somewhere. And if I misbehave, I'm going to hear about it. So I got to be a good kid and I don't even chase the women. So, but I also point out that none of them have been chasing me either. So I guess I just do what we got to do. But the reality is, I think there are always ways to find some sort of a connection with other people. And then, of course, that's what you do. It's all about creating a connection, creating a relationship, even if it's only for a couple of hours or an hour or 45 minutes. But you do it, which is what it's all about.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the funniest stuff is real life experiences.
Oh, absolutely.
And if people can see themselves in what I've written, then I've done my job as a writer.
So do you have any plans to retire?
Never. I mean,
okay, good for you.
Retire from what?
I know, right.
From making fun of people and making them laugh. I mean, I don't know what I would do with myself. And even if there's always going to be, I don't care how technologically advanced our society gets, people will always want and need to laugh.
Yeah.
They're always going to want to do that. And if they're wanting to do that, then I will find a way to get to them. And that's why as I said, that's why like working on cruise ships has become like a new avenue for me to make people laugh. And so, yeah, there's no way. I don't know what else I would do with myself.
Well, and from my perspective, as long as I can inspire people and I can make people think a little bit and feel better about themselves, I'm going to do it.
Right.
And I do. And I wrote a book during COVID that was published last August called Live Like a Guide Dog. And it's all about helping people learn to control fear. And I use lessons I learned from 8 guide dogs and my wife's service dog to do that. My wife was in a wheelchair her whole life. Great marriage. She read, I pushed, worked out well. But the bottom line is that dogs can teach us so many lessons, and there's so much that we can learn from them. So I'm grateful that I had the opportunity to create this book and get it out there. And I think that, again, as long as I can continue to inspire people, I'm going to do it.
Because why wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't I? Exactly right.
Yeah. So I mean,
and I think if I stopped, I think my wife would beat up on me. So I got to be nice.
Exactly.
She's monitoring from somewhere. Well, this has been fun. We've been doing this for over an hour already.
Yes, we have, and it doesn't feel like an hour, which means
I know.
You know how to conduct a great interview, Michael.
Well, it's been very enjoyable to have you on here. And if people want to reach out to you and so on, how do they do that?
Well, probably the best place is my website, which is Greg Schwem, not Schwimmer, Schwem.
Schwem.
Greg Schwem. So GregSchwem.com. And you can see lots of video clips of me doing stand-up in a lot of different situations. You can read about the book, and you can kind of read a little bit about where I am right now. And I would love to hear from you, and I would love to hear your stories too, because again, I want to be the least interesting person in the room. So you tell me about you, and maybe we can end up getting together, and then I can come to where you are and make you laugh, and maybe a lot of other people in that city
Cool. And I
or
agree.
or your business.
Or your business. Yeah, I agree. And I hope people will reach out. I definitely want to stay in touch, and
Mm-hmm.
we ought to do that and find ways to help each other and all that. And if nothing else, we can talk about my cat and we can pick on her.
Right.
And she won't even pay attention, so that puts it all in perspective. But it's been fun to have you on here, and I hope that all of you will reach out to Greg. It will be great, and I think that he clearly would love to hear from you. I'd love to hear from you. I want to hear what you think about today. This has been a great episode. Not today, just today's episode. I'll let you worry about the rest of the day. But feel free to reach out to me at michaelhi@accessibe.com. That's Michael, Michaelhi at accessibe, ACCESSIBE.com. Love to hear from you. Or go to our podcast page at www.michaelhingson.com/podcast. And Michael Hingson, since I'm spelling, is MICHAELHINGSON.com/podcast. Please give us a 5-star rating wherever you are listening or watching us or whatever. We really value your thoughts, and we value your ratings. And if you give us good ratings, I'll even tell Greg. So we hope that you will be with us and that you'll do that. If you have any ideas for guests, anybody, including you, Greg, I'm always looking for more people to come on the podcast. So please don't hesitate to do it. But again, Greg, I want to thank you for being here. This has been absolutely enjoyable, and we got to do it again sometime.
Absolutely, Michael. Thank you so much.